Former Irish mobster Edward Mackenzie's new memoir is called Street Soldier. During this hour and 10-minute event, he's joined by co-authors Phyllis Karras and Ross Moscato. Portions of this program contain language that some may find offensive.
Welcome to Borders, Books, and Music in Peabody, Massachusetts. I'm pleased to see so many people here tonight that are excited by books. And we're welcoming Edward J. Mackenzie Jr., Phyllis Karras, and Ross Moscato, the authors of Street Soldier, My Life as an Enforcer for Whitey Bulger and the Boston Irish Mob. John Dean in the New York Times Book Review said, Eddie Mackenzie's graphic account of his life as a violent street criminal in South Boston is also almost unspeakably brutal, cold-blooded, ruthless, merciless, callous, cruel, and fascinating. Reading it is like happening upon a street crime and entering the perpetrator's mind. Let's first hear from Ross Moscato on his experience.
Well, first off, I'd like to thank Borders, Books, and Music for having us here tonight. And as well, I would like to thank C-SPAN for filming this and broadcasting this. And this is a very exciting opportunity for all of us. The book, we've been fortunate. The book has been very, very well received from coast to coast. And I guess specifically tonight we have an assembly of bibliophiles, and that you come out to a bookstore, and those who are viewing on C-SPAN are very interested in the production of books, the whole experience of the writing of a book. And this has been a very, very extraordinary opportunity. One thing that's very important to understand, and that we've described this before, is that all books are something of a conspiracy. And I mean that in a very benign fashion, not in the conspiracy we describe in Eddie's book, in that books involve editors, books involve writers, books involve researchers, books involve enthusiasm that is generated from a lot of different areas. And we're very fortunate. For instance, David Ratner is here tonight from Newman Communications, which is the group that has done some exemplary and very exceptional work in helping publicize the book. And I think he can probably empathize with me in that even in a public relations and a communications firm, just to get a letter out involves everyone's fingerprints on a page. So you can imagine if you magnify that and you multiply that on a book and what happens. And what we did do here with Street Soldier is Eddie, we're very fortunate Eddie's a good writer, and he is. I like to tell the story one time that a professor from Northeastern saw something that Eddie had written that had not been touched or not had been edited by anyone. And he was joking, but only half joking, and he said, well, why do you even need anyone to work with? Because he really liked Eddie's work. And we are very fortunate, both Phyllis and I. And in terms of the development of a book, I was also fortunate in that not only that I worked with Eddie, who had a great story, but I worked with an accomplished author in Phyllis Karras, who has written 6 books prior to this. Am I correct? 6 books prior to this. So my own apprenticeship in storytelling was, I was very fortunate in this. And what we did with this book, you see 3 names, and John Dean in the New York Times said that the book was written by committee, but of course all books are written by committee. I think we're just probably a little more explicit in describing this for the reader and the public in terms of how this went. And it's a very good story. It's a true story. It's a very, very stark, upsetting, sometimes entertaining, humorous, violent story. And I guess that's precisely the reason that it has done so well. And again, I thank you very much for coming. And I thank C-SPAN. I thank Borders, Books, and Music. And now I will hand it over to Phyllis Karras, whom I'm very fortunate to have worked with, and she will provide you some further insight and background as to Street Soldier. Thank you.
Hi. Thanks, Ross. I'm Phyllis Karras, and my friend here is Eddie Mackenzie. Together, as Ross told you all, we wrote a book, Street Soldier, My Life as an Enforcer for Whitey Bulger and the Boston Irish Mob. It's the story of Eddie's life, not mine, not Ross's, for the two of us were just the conduits for Eddie's thoughts and his memories. However, I did want to take just a minute to tell you how a relatively mild-mannered BU professor in North Shore lady got to spend 3 years of her life hearing the innermost secrets of a Whitey Bulger leg breaker, a man with a 9-page, double-sided criminal record with over 50 entries. We did not run into each other at the Peabody Mall near Borders, nor in my hometown of Marblehead, or his hometown of Southie. Our connection was made in the North End office of my agent, Helen Reese. For a reason I will never be able to understand, Helen thought I was the right writer, along with Ross, for Eddie's story. So through emails, meetings at BU, and phone calls, the book was written, sold, canceled, rewritten, resold, and finally, at long last, on May 1st, published. It has been a wonderful ride since that May 1st publication, with positive reviews in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Kirkus, Library Journal, Publishers Weekly, Boston Herald, 4 weeks on the Boston Globe's bestseller list, dozens of national radio spots for Eddie, as well as his appearances on national television with Pat Buchanan, Wolf Blitzer, and before that on 60 Minutes. However, I do want to further explain that neither Ross nor I nor our publisher would have been interested in working with Eddie and helping him tell his story, if not our belief that the book he had in him had redeeming qualities. There is no doubt what Eddie did was appalling, but all that ended 13 years ago. And even if he isn't a redeemed man himself, as he will be the first to admit, the window that he offers onto a very dark corner of our society is important and revealing. Unlike other true crime books, Street Soldier neither glamorizes the gangster life nor romanticizes Eddie. It makes it clear that those involved in such behavior are bad, dangerous men, that they will destroy other human beings without giving it a second thought, that such a way of life is a dead end, and that the likes of these people will always be with us. There is value in honestly depicting these realities, even if we prefer to pretend they don't exist. And Eddie, who has earned a college degree and is raising 2 daughters as a single parent, should be recognized for having the intellect and ability to portray the world he knew in a way that makes for compelling reading. And though perhaps we do not have to forgive or excuse his past sins, he should be credited with accepting the fact of who he was and being willing to share his experience honestly and to move forward with his life in a more positive way. It's been a long journey for the book, for my relationship with Eddie and Ross, but nowhere as long as the journey that brought Eddie from the dark and ugly crevices of foster care at its very worst to the even darker and uglier crevices of Whitey Bulger's world. Ross and I know the story very well, but we want you to hear some of it firsthand. So let me hand the podium over to my co-author, my leg breaker, my friend, Eddie Mack.
Boy, where do I begin? I guess I'll open up by saying, every time I do one of these, people say you're a veteran, Ed, because you've probably done about 30 of these, but every one's like a new adventure to me to try to express myself and try to say what's in the book and try to bring you folks into the psyche and the world of what I called the street predator and what I called my neighborhood as the jungle. And to do that, I'm going to have to be a little gritty with you folks tonight. I might even swear a little bit, but I'll do my best to be good. But I can't be fake about this. I have to just say it like it is. I'm going to open up with an excerpt, bits and pieces that I pulled from the book and kind of turned into a little speech. But before I do this, I just want to say, yes, I did put it all behind me, most of it behind me. I slipped a little bit along the way, but I'm fixing that too. But most importantly, I got my GED and I walked into the University of Massachusetts at Boston and said, here I am. I need to get a degree. I need to do something with my life for the sake of my children so that I can prove to them and I can prove to everybody else that there are people like me out there and there are people, and once they decide to change and make something of themselves, they can do it. Needless to say, I'm not on no ego trip or anything like that. I got my degree in 3 years, and it's a pre-law degree of all things. I figured since I was studying the other side of the fence, I might want to study the legal side. I knew the terminology very well, so I aced quite a few classes. One of the very first classes I studied was cultural diversity through literature. And in this class, I had to write about Malcolm X. I had to read the book, and I had to write about this guy. And I make some references to Malcolm X in my book, Street Soldier. And it's kind of, ironic because here you have probably one of the most fiercest former racists in South Boston, along with Frankie McDonald and all the kids stoning the buses, stoning the blacks, and force busing, right at the forefront of everything. And here I am at the University of Massachusetts studying about Malcolm X, and I'll start with that. This is what I call the street predator, and it's in Street Soldier. How do I explain to you who and what I am? Most people are so removed from the life of an urban street predator that they can't even begin to find a point of reference for, never mind an understanding of what we are about. Malcolm X said it perfectly in his autobiography. The hustler out there in the ghetto jungles has less respect for the white power structure than any other Negro in North America. He wrote, "The ghetto hustler is internally restrained by nothing. He has no religion, no concept of morality, no civic responsibility, no fear, nothing. To survive, he is constantly out there preying on others, probing for any human weakness like a ferret. The ghetto hustler is forever frustrated, restless, and anxious for some action. Whatever he undertakes, he commits himself to it fully, absolutely." Of course, he was talking specifically about the young, urban black predator, but he could have just as well been talking about a young Eddie McKenzie or Ronnie Watts or Frankie McDonald, all white and as predacious as they come. Malcolm X knew what motivates a young thug on the street, black or white, who is not educated, who has been deprived of love, who has been beaten and neglected, and who is looked at by society not only in a patronizing, disparaging, and indifferent manner, but also with fear. Yeah, that's right, fear. It's the type of look that energizes and fuels the rage in you. And when that happens, you say to yourself, now I'm going to give you something to be afraid of. Malcolm X understood how the street predator is an animal devoid of conscience, whose primary reason for being is to survive and win at all cost. And let me tell you, when you are robbing and mugging, you are not thinking, oh shit, I can't believe what a dirtball I am. One of these days, I'm going to see the light and be overcome with regret for the sad mistakes I made. Never happened, folks. What you are doing is trying to win in a brutal environment in which you have established your own rules. Rules that tilt the playing field in your favor. You steal and intimidate and brutalize like you were in the jungle. You don't have the confidence to think and play by the rules of a civilized and law-abiding society, so you ignore that game and play the game of the underworld, the game that you have made up. There wasn't much we wouldn't do. Oh, sure, most of the guys I hung with, but not all recognized some code of honor. Yet any house, even those where kids and senior citizens and the handicapped lived, was fair game. I, for example, wouldn't rip off or mess directly with a senior citizen or a little kid or anyone who was handicapped. But let me tell you, and I could say this because I never fell victim to drugs or booze, at least for any long stretch. When chemicals grab hold of his mind, the urban predator is not only an animal, but a crazed and stupid animal. The tripping and drugged-out predator is the most dangerous predator. Addicts will beat their own mother to score money to pay for a fix. Violence was my drug. When I gave someone a beating, it was better than the high any drug he pulled from a speedball. The more I did actual damage, or at least put up the front of danger, the bigger my rave on the streets. Even animals in the woods understand the concept of intimidation. Watch a cat arch its back and hiss, or a dog bare its teeth and growl. I know where these animals are coming from. My back was arched and my teeth bared as I combed the streets in search of my own prey. In the world of the streets, at least in my case, there was also a desire to establish a position of leadership, even if leading meant being the king predator. It turned me on to be the baddest and meanest SOB on the streets, the guy no one messed with, and to obtain that position, I was as vicious as they come. Let me tell you something else, except for the rarest of exceptions, and I like to believe I represent one of those exceptions. The street predator never sees the light. He never appreciates that his way is erroneous and damning. And even when he gets caught, he's certain that society is screwing him for playing the game the way it should be played. Now I'm going to read just a couple quick excerpts from this, and you folks can ask questions. And believe me when I tell you, don't be shy. Ask me anything you want, but when you ask me, be ready for a straightforward answer. I'm not going to beat around the bush with anybody. Whitey was an institution unto himself. Brilliant, ruthless, murderous. Lucifer personified. If the word on the street was to be believed, and what other word could I rely on, Whitey Bulger could kill you and your dog, fuck your wife, burn down your house, and walk away clean. The South Boston I knew so well from the mid-'70s through 1990 dripped with Irish pride. Love for neighbor, resistance to outsiders, and a desire to run its own show. It was a perfect place for a guy like Whitey Bulger to build a massive criminal enterprise and earn a reputation as a gentleman bandit and legendary street warrior. It was also the perfect place for a politician like Whitey's brother Billy Bulger to build power. I believe that Billy Bulger was and remains one of Southie's best assets. I also believe that he orchestrated corruption and helped run interference for his brother against law enforcement. Billy had to have known what his brother was up to, Whitey was up to. Working for Whitey gave me a feeling of ultimate power. With my background as a fighter, selling drugs for Whitey made it inevitable that I would do other things for him as well. Whitey ruled through intimidation and fear. Anyone who assisted him in creating a climate of intimidation and fear became, as the Boston Globe once wrote of me, a Bulger favorite. My job description was simple. From 1985 to 1990, I worked for Whitey as a street soldier, an enforcer, a leg breaker, a drug runner. I was hired muscle who distributed drugs for my boss and broke the limbs of those who disrespected him. I was often sent on missions, which made me feel like I was pushing up against the icy shoulder of death. One night, me and my two buddies kidnapped him from his apartment. This was a drug dealer that owed money, and he was just not paying. We duct taped his arms and legs, threw him in the trunk of a black Ford LTD, and headed out to Blue Hills in Milton, where we'd put 2 bullets in the back of his head and bury him. It was the first time I'd have had to kill anybody. To be honest with you folks, I wouldn't have killed him. I would have let somebody in the car kill him, but what's the difference? If you're with him and you're an accessory, you're a murderer. So I thank God that this particular story came out that I didn't kill anybody. It was the first time I'd have had to kill anybody, but I wasn't thinking much about what that meant. It was business, nothing personal. We only had a couple of turns to make before we were on 93 South, when we saw the blue lights of a cop car flashing. Turned out our car had a broken taillight. The 2 cops looked into the car and recognized its occupants. One asked us if we minded if we looked in the trunk. We said, yeah, of course we do. And so we told him to get a search warrant. So while the police officer was getting a search warrant, the gentleman in the trunk's name was Bush. We were yelling back to Bush saying, Bush, listen, we're playing war games. This is the God's honest truth. It's in the police report somewhere. We're playing war games, and we're going to give you $10,000 to get out of South Boston with your family. And if you don't tell the police that we're playing war games and this was nothing other than that, we're going to, torture, brutalize every member of your family for every day we're in jail for this if you don't play ball with us. So by the time the cops got the search warrant to open the trunk, Bush was in there duct tape, and he was like, and they took the tape and, war games, I'm just a prisoner. We were only goofing off, officer. But of course the police didn't believe us. They arrested us, and we got taken in. It was all over the place. We were charged with kidnapping and all this stuff, but Bush left South Boston and never came back, so, no witness, no case. So that case was eventually dismissed. So much has been written about Whitey's intelligence and psychology. He continues to intrigue and perplex people. Then again, Whitey was a gangster, and America has long been fascinated by organized crime and figures like Al Capone, Dutch Schultz, Meyer Lansky, Lucky Luciano, and John Gotti. Whitey Bulger was like all those guys, and like none of them. He intimidated, controlled, killed, and made lots of money from the rackets. But he had his own way of doing things and a cunning pathology that separated him from the rest. As proof, I submit that while most of America's major organized mob bosses have died either by violence or in prison, including John Gotti, Whitey is still out there somewhere. It wasn't difficult to see how Whitey became a leader of street thugs like myself. In the mean streets of Southie, you not only had to be smart and disciplined, you also had to be ruthless, willing to kill when necessary. Whitey Bulger was the total package, and every one of us loved him for it. We wanted to be like him and be near him because we saw the way he was treated. People not only respected him, they feared him. We saw the way he manipulated people and created an organization that served him perfectly. We saw his money, his girls, his connections, his power. We saw the way that he did his time in prison in Alcatraz and got out. We saw the way that he beat authorities year after year, running his rackets and staying out of handcuffs. We knew he wasn't fearless, that he didn't have the physical courage to go one-on-one like many of us, but that was okay. He had us to take care of that part of the business. He was still a ferocious bastard, and he could send the fear of the devil through all of Southie. Now, I'd like to end this because a lot of people ask me when I'm reading, where you are today, Ed, what do you do today? Well, I have 5 beautiful young daughters. I have 3 mothers, and I'm still single. Bang. But I have 100% custody of my 10 and 11-year-old girls. And for me, that's what my life is all about right now. So I'll end this with a little thing I wrote about them. With the little girls, it's a lot easier. For now, I try to read to Devin, who's 10, and Kayla, who's 9, every night. Last night's story was Beauty and the Beast, about a young girl who gets lost trying to find her father. She comes upon a castle with a huge, ugly beast within. Once Belle gets past the ugliness of the beast, she falls in love with the kind and gentle person inside. I told them, you can't judge people on their looks, and they listened. Every night after my story, my 2 dark-haired little beauties fall off into sleep. As I sit there watching them, certain no one will hit them tomorrow, and they will have enough to eat, and no one will poke fun at their clothes because they don't fit. They are so peaceful lying there, knowing their daddy is close by to protect them and hold them, and tell them how much he loves them. I never forget that I have no choice but to make Devin and Kayla my whole life. Every morning I give each girl a smoochie, kiss on the cheek to wake her. Once they're up, I make them breakfast. Devin likes her eggs over easy, Kayla likes them scrambled. No one ever made me an egg when I was their age, which makes it all the sweeter for me to do it for them. Once my girls' bellies are full and each school pack is full of snacky and juice boxes, we're off. As I let them out of the car at their school, I take another moment to marvel at their innocence. I watch my precious little chicks, their every move, each little step. I know, without a question, that I would gladly give my life for my daughters. Being a father is a gift from God that gives me the chance to make up for what happened to me as a child. I've made a lot of mistakes, but this much I know for sure. My babies will always have a loving father. I will never let them down. Their lives have to be better than mine. As for my future, I hope that when Devin and Kayla are grown, they can understand the truth about their daddy, that he was a bad man, but he wasn't the worst man, and he even managed to improve himself and do some good. The best part of this morning is my little Kayla, just as she opens the door to enter school for one last second, she turns back to look at her daddy and blows me a kiss. I melt as I blow her one in return. Thank you. Whoa. Sounds a little mushy for a mob leg breaker, but I tell you, folks, that's where it's at. People often ask me, are you redeemed? Do you have any redemption, Eddie? I said, absolutely not. I don't have any remorse. You don't understand. That's the jungle. That's where I grew up. In the jungle, if the lion just eats a meal and the lion's belly is full, does that lion stop being a predator? I doubt it. I think not. Through age, you acquire the wisdom and knowledge to truly know the difference between right and wrong. And any redemption through the eyes of Eddie Mack comes to my innocent daughters, my children, that I know that I can't, there's no way that I can trip. I can't mess up. I got to be here for them. I got to make sure that they never experience, they never see what I saw. So before I open for questions, I just want to show you folks an email that I got from somebody. And, dealing with Ross Moscato and Phyllis, Ross was a fantastic athlete, got a full scholarship running at BC. So he's used to he's used to the swearing and the profanity and stuff like that. But to me, Ross and Phyllis grew up in what I call the leafy suburbs. And, they're not naive by any means, but they don't, necessarily have the psyche and the lingo of what I call the street predator. So, about a year and a half ago, we were bumping heads with the Boston Globe and stuff like that. So one of my famous sayings was, and you'll read this throughout Street Soldiers, all I had to do with my reputation was come up to you and say, listen, Jimmy, we got to straighten this problem out. I don't want this to get ugly. This is going to get ugly. And that's all I had to do was say that, and people just knew right away, uh-oh, I got to do this. So here's something from my BU professor that she sent me on an email. And this is, Fox Butterfield quoted me in the New York Times a week ago. I said that Boston is best known for two things, politics and revenge. I said, here you have politics, William Bulger, president of the Massachusetts Senate. And here you have his brother, Whitey Bulger, revenge. And that's what the Irish are best known for. And here's my email. Can't tell you how thrilled I am with this. Fox is a real, in-depth, serious crime reporter for the Times. And the fact that he interviewed you is the best thing that could possibly happen to your credibility. Fuck the Globe. You're in there, buddy. P.S. Delete this email if you know what's good for you. I don't want this to get ugly. I'm going to frame this. That was great. I didn't delete it, Phil. Sorry. Okay, now if anybody wants to ask me any questions, feel free. Yes.
That was a great story that you were telling. I have two questions. Did you serve any time, and what was the one thing that made you decide that you were going to go straight, if that's the right word?
Yes, I served time. I've served time off and on through my life, but in this particular instance, 51 of us went to Danbury Federal Penitentiary. No, 51 of us got indicted. 10 of us went to Danbury Federal Penitentiary in connection with Whitey Bulger. We stayed in the hole for a couple of days because they couldn't process us till Monday. So one of the first people we see is Raymond Patriarca Jr., the godfather of all New England. And he looks at us, he goes, you guys know why you're here, don't you? I goes, yeah, of course we do, Ray. We got caught. He goes, no, you didn't. You got served up by your boss, Whitey Bulger. He's a rat. He's a canary. We've known this for years. A couple of the guys with me got sick, and I just simply was in denial. A few years later, it turned out that he was the biggest rat of them all, Whitey Bulger. But at that particular time, I made a decision. I says, I got to get out of here now. This is crazy. I've been putting all these years looking at this guy like he was Caesar to me. And, people ask me, Ed, how'd you feel at that moment when you found out that he was an informant? I goes, well, how do you think Caesar felt when he got shanked by Brutus? It was very painful and deadly. So what I did was I negotiated a deal with my Colombian connection. I was able to get, the FBI a $40 to $50 million cocaine deal, basically bought it for my freedom. But that was like the beginning of a turning point, getting pinched. I think, folks, throughout my life, I've had this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thing with me because I ran a local gym in South Boston. I taught martial arts to many kids. I didn't charge 90% of them. They couldn't afford it. I often took them to Chinatown for dinner and those English subletter movies and did their homework with them and stuff like that. And by night, I was Mr. Hyde. I was playing the life of the underworld and so forth. But I think the good seed and the bad seed has been a struggle in my life, but it's starting to overcome. But the turning point for me was being in Danbury Federal Prison. And I'd be fake to say that if I didn't get pinched that day, I might be doing what I'm doing now. I'd probably be dead or be in Walpole or something like that. So, and I'll further that question by saying, all my life I've believed in one thing. You know what I mean? I'm a Roman Catholic, but I got problems with church and all that stuff. But I do believe in God. And I saw a movie that the colonel in Street Soldier, the guy that took care of me for 5 or 6 years, and the only guy that really paid attention to me, that I called Dad, he made me watch this movie with him one time, and it was called Somebody Up There Likes Me, and it was Paul Newman. It was about Rocky Graziano, a prize fighter. So I referenced myself to that, and I go through life by saying, somebody up there likes you, Eddie. somebody up there has you out here. So if I walk by a homeless man, I'll pull a buck out. Even if I only have $1.50, I'll throw it in there. I'll say, I can go without a coffee today. You know what I mean? I do simple little things like that. I come across kids. If I see them acting goofy and stupid, I say, come here, what are you guys doing? You know, and I try to talk to them and try to help everybody I come in contact, because I really believe what goes around comes around. We could go into this forever, but we only got an hour, so I'm sorry. Did I answer that the way you... Okay. Yes, anybody else? Yes.
No, with the Bulger brothers, you know, myself, I always thought that politicians are mostly motivated by power. And is it power that the two of them are motivated by? Say, in the case of Whitey, it can't really be money because he didn't really spend the money, but it was all about getting it somehow. Or is it power? What motivates him?
Well, it's power. You know, to me, Whitey Bulger is weak and insecure coward. Anybody that has to shoot people or maybe stab somebody in the back or something like that, or get guys like me to do their dirty work, is a coward. You know, I've never, got anybody from behind. Now, I was third-time national heavyweight kickboxing champion. I won the Golden Gloves. It was face-to-face with me, man. You know, a couple of things I had to do a little reconnaissance-type stuff, but I was the hands-on type of guy. I was the guy with the balls. I was the guy that wasn't the coward. Guys like Whitey Bulger are cowards. They're all power-hungry. What they do is they get at the top there, and then they have all these people do their work and try to make them look like the tough guys they are. Then you go over to William Bulger. You know, everybody takes William Bulger for granted, but I can honestly say that William Bulger has done a lot for South Boston. William Bulger has done a lot for the state of Massachusetts. William Bulger has done a tremendous amount for the University of Massachusetts. Is William Bulger his brother's keeper? That's a tough question. Did William Bulger protect his brother and help his brother? Absolutely. Would I protect my brother and help my brother? Of course I would. I was on NECN and Chet Curtis asked me, Eddie, where do you draw the line here? You know, the guy's a serial killer. Whitey, he's choked women, he murdered women. And I said, Chet, you don't understand. You know, you're from the leafy suburbs. I'm from a tight-knit Irish neighborhood of South Boston where, you know, you have the Bulger brothers, you have John Conley, who all grew up in the Mary Ellen McCormick projects, the first projects in America, I might add. And, you know, not only do you form a loyalty for the kids that you grow up with in that tight little neighborhood, and you got 5, 6, 7 Bulger brothers living in a 2 or 3 bedroom flat, so you got bunk beds everywhere. If you form an even more fiercer loyalty to your brother. Now, if I grew up in the leafy suburbs where Ted Kaczynski grew up, he got served up by his brother like that. You know, we wouldn't serve up anybody from our neighborhood, no matter how sick they were. You know, they say Whitey Bulger was a sociopathic, serial-killing gangster, but he was our gangster. That's how we saw it. Yes?
Were there any other Boston politicians who you felt might have been close to Whitey Bulger?
You know, I can't answer that because, you know, I might get a speeding ticket or something like that. I might have to pull a permit in City Hall or something, so I don't know of anybody.
It's a good question.
But if you know about Boston politics and the Irish, I'll give you a perfect example. Mayor Curley, one of the famous mayors of South Boston, is quoted as saying of the Irish, "We're going to outfuck you now, we're going to outvote you later." So the Irish do stick together. I'll get him and then I'll get you. I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
Do you? I'm from your
You
same.
like that
You struck a code. I'm from your same genetic background. I grew up in a blue collar
My genetic background?
town with more Italians and Poles and Irish. So we had a nice mix. It made the fights even. And the guys, I'm older than you, so the guys I went to school with, the Marine Corps, you straighten them out, or they're in jail, or some of them are dead, you know. But I'm wondering, basically now, you're in your 40s, right? What?
Yeah, everybody looks married.
Okay,
yeah,
so
45.
how do you go back to the neighborhood? Can you go back to the pub and have a beer? And can you hang out where you used to hang out?
Well,
can you go back into Southie and walk the streets anymore?
You know, I have 2 daughters in Southie. You know, I work out at the local athletic club. I've been there 15, 16 years. I play racquetball. I love to play racquetball. So I'm actually in Southie to this day, 3 or 4 days a week. Go back to the local pub where I used to drink and hang out. I never did. I owned a pub in South Boston. That's the only one I hung out with because I was making money. I was never a real drinker. I never was into the nightclub scene. The only time I was into nightclubs was because I worked in them and owned a couple in my day, you know. But I'm in Southie a lot, and I see those people, those same people on the corner and stuff like that, and I make it a real point not to see them. Because I want to put that behind me. I don't want to be like those people, like Jimmy, Joey, and Johnny that are on the corner of D Street and Broadway, and, you know, they were brought up on A Street. You know what I'm saying? Southie is my hometown. Well, to me, Southie is where I come from. But I don't want to die in Southie. I want to see the world. I want to take my daughters and experience life with them. I don't want to hang out with the boys and, you know, drink a Guinness in the pub and stuff like that. At least not them people. I want to hang out with people like you. You know what I mean? Yes.
It seems like you've turned your life around quite a bit, though.
But it
do you
seems.
Yes. Well, you looked pretty, chest was puffed up there when you said that you were a tough guy there at the end. And do you still find yourself thinking that sometimes things don't go your way, that you'd like to muscle somebody again?
Well, I like to say I used to be live, but now I'm Memorex. But to be perfectly honest with you, what I call being a street predator is like going to AA. It's a battle I have to fight every day for the rest of my life. You know, sometimes I might see a quick score, an easy way out. And the only thing that deters me, and it's sad to have to say this, but it's real important to say this too, is my children. You know, if I didn't have kids, I'd probably still be in the game, you know, because I became a product of my environment, folks. It's all I really knew. You know what I mean? The jungle, it's all I knew. I mean, huh?
Children know what type of life you had before.
Well, my 17 and 18-year-old have both read the book. They live in South Boston. They've been in private school from day one because of busing. Boston public schools, no good. But the 10 and 11-year-old, they're going to have to get a little bit older and mature enough to understand what this is all about anyway, so they don't need to know that right now. I will say that thanks to Hollywood, the movies that come out today, nothing really surprises kids. You know, they read this. My daughter Courtney's like, Dad, I read a few things. That's pretty cool. I thought I saw something similar to that in a movie last week, you know? And then, you know, and another important thing to me is people ask me, how do you shield your daughters? How are you going to protect your daughters, you know, against men and all these things like that? And I goes, well, you know, when we wanted to get laid in South Boston, we would go to your neighborhood in the leafy suburbs because that's where you shielded your kids, and they were young, naive, and they were basically easy prey. You try to get laid in South Boston, you're buying a 30-pack, you're going to a movie, you're going to get dinner. It's going to take you a little bit because nobody's jumping your bones from my neighborhood without working for it. You understand what I'm saying? Okay. Did I answer that? Was that okay? You got more? Okay. Okay. Jack, and then I'll get to you, sir.
Ed, would you comment on your relationship with John Conley, and what do you think is going to happen to him in the future?
My relationship with John Conley, I've been to his house many times. I've had coffee with the man. All along, I thought that Whitey Bulger had owned the FBI. He had a few, not the FBI as a whole. You know, I want to make it loud and clear, folks. I'm not knocking the FBI. You know, I just believe in every bushel of apples there's a few bad apples, and the Boston office has got this huge stain, and they got a few bad apples there. But they all set themselves up for the fall because they took John Conley from the FBI, sent him back into the neighborhood where he grew up with Whitey Bulger. He owed Billy Bulger because Billy Bulger basically got him in college and helped him and did so many things for him. So he just went back to where he came from and mixed right in. My feelings about John Conley is, you know, he's about 61, 62 or whatever. He's looking at the next 9 or 10 years in prison. I honestly don't believe he's going to do that because he has a lovely young wife. He has some really handsome young twins, some kids and boys. $1.5 million worth of property out there, and so much to lose if he doesn't get up and follow suit like the rest of them and start singing The Soprano. So I honestly believe that you'll be seeing John Conley very soon singing. Yes.
If you ran into like a young version of you, someone in their late 20s, maybe early 30s, who had been getting involved in organized crime, and they asked you for some advice to maybe stay in it, to get out of it, what would you tell them?
Well, you know, I'd say whatever you do, don't watch The Sopranos. And, you know, don't watch Goodfellas and stuff like that, because my opinion of those shows is, it sounds a little topsy-turvy. They're great entertainment, but that's what they are, folks. They're entertainment. Some of it's real, but most of it's glorified. And this life is short-lived, and what they don't show, yeah, they show some gory scenes, people getting sawed up, 2 in the back of the head, the traditional, you know, legendary storytelling that the mafia and stuff like that throw out there. But, you see here, I'll give you what I'm saying is Tony Soprano's up. He's got his lovely wife and his children going to the best colleges around in their beautiful home. But when Tony Soprano gets indicted and thrown away, there's 3 more people that are going on welfare that we're going to be paying for. Their whole lives are going to be ruined. You don't think about victims like that, and then you don't think about the many families of the people that they murder and that they extort from. I mean, come on, you have people that come over to this country as immigrants through Ellis Island, through New York, or however way they find anywhere. This is America. To me, America is the promised land, the land of opportunity where you can call Bush a warmonger, an asshole, and you don't get dragged out of your house at midnight. Did I? So, you know what I mean? And these hardworking people are just trying to make their niche in life, and then they have their own people who are the bad apples who thrive off them and suck the blood out of them, like the Whitey Bulgers with the Irish, the Gaudis with the Italians, the Russians. They're preying on their own people, you know what I'm saying? And to me, it's very, very wrong, but you don't see that side. Yes?
I want to follow up on the addictive personality thing.
As far as a street predator is concerned?
Yeah.
In reference to AA
it concerns me a little because we all have different kinds of support systems to help us when we have some issues. If we were addicted to a drug or to alcohol or whatever, we have organizations, we have support systems, we have counseling to help us a little through that. And I heard your remark about your daughters being your support system in a sense. I'll put you on the spot by saying, I don't think that's enough. Do you think that's enough to help you through what you called yourself an addictive personality? You got a high, use that expression, you got a high from the violence that you're involved with. How do you help yourself not to continue that need for that high?
I watch The Sopranos. I watch it on TV and I live it through TV. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, cool.
Is that really enough of a support system?
For me, there's 5 support systems. It's Brittany, Devin, Kayla, Courtney, and Lauren. I can't say it any better, folks. 5 beautiful girls that need me. They need my support. They need me to be strong. I have to set the examples for them. If I continue along the way I am today, and if I fall off the ladder, where are they going to be? I don't want to be in Walpole prison thinking about those 5 innocent little children that are out there about to embark on a life without a father, without, Courtney's hopefully she's going to Boston University next year. Lauren's finishing her senior year in a wonderful private school for girls. Nobody's going to pay that if I'm gone. You know what I mean? I'm the support. I'm the machine that keeps these girls happy, that keeps them going. I can't fall. I can't slip. You know what I mean? Now, if I didn't have my girls, then you got me. I don't know what I'd do, but I'm blessed.
The racquetball, I mean, you're fiercely competitive still in your exercise.
Well, yeah, racquetball and stuff like that. I'm fiercely competitive because I'm an athlete. I was a professional fighter. I walked into the University of Massachusetts. I was 34 years old, and the coach was Coach Kent. I never played football. Because I never went to high school. I dropped out of the 10th grade and went into the Marine Corps. And then So I walked on to the University of Massachusetts, and I said, and Coach Kent was a probation officer. I goes, Coach, I want to play football. He goes, all right, get a physical. And my buddy ran the South Boston Health Center. I won't say what year, and I won't say his name, but he made me look like I was 26, 27 years old and gave me a great report, So here I am playing football with these kids, and I still don't know the terminology stuff. I go, Coach, what position am I playing? And he knew about me, and he goes, put it this way, Mac, if I tell you to kill the quarterback, I don't really mean it, you know what I mean? So I was a defensive tackle, and I actually got killed over there, but I played every game and had a blast. But to me, athleticism and, through physical strength and physical stability, you keep the body healthy, the mind stays healthy. You know what I'm saying? If I was drinking and boozing and basically not taking care of myself, then my chances of really grabbing a score or falling off the ladder would be more because my mind would be weak. But I'm a very mentally tough person. I can deal with just about anything that comes my way. When you get sodomized at the age of 9 and you get raped at 17 I went into the Army first, and I got raped right before I went in. And when those things happen to you and then you follow up by being basically a scumbag for Whitey Bulger for 5 or 6 years and you get entrenched into that world, you form a resilience to be able to say, hey, wait a minute. This is yesterday, but today is today. I got to take a nice deep breath of fresh air, and I got to look for today. I can't think about yesterday anymore. So, these terrible things that happened to me in my life, I'm able to just click it off like that. You folks wouldn't even known about it had I not written this book, Street Soldier, with these two folks, because I remember sending the first scene about being 9 years old, being taken by the tutor and, sodomized, raped, and all this madness happened to me. And in both the emails, Phyllis, being Jewish, was like, oy vey, my God. And Ross was like, what the fuck?
Irish, Italian, French.
Yeah, so it was pretty horrible stuff, But once again, you can't live for yesterday. You got to live for today, folks. Yes, I'll get you right after. I'm sorry.
Could you speak a little bit about your experiences as a foster child?
Well, I'll tell you, I was dropped off at the front steps. I'll never forget this. And it's amazing at the young age of like 4 or 5 years old what someone can remember. I remember my mother and father saying they were going to give me a dime so I could get a candy bar. My whole life I've never forgotten that one sentence because it's the last I've ever seen of them. I guess they, in the span of the next year, the first foster home that we went to, they'd come by and they dropped off toys and stuff like that, which were, as soon as they left, the toys were immediately packaged and given to the real sons and daughters of the foster people that were there. The first 2 foster homes, were basically slapped around, kicked around. We couldn't sit on the couch. We had to sit on the floor. We were treated like animals, and they were in it for the money. One foster home, my arm was broken for about 3 weeks. The people just didn't want to believe me. And finally, the lady at school, through my crying and complaining and not being able to go like this, took me in, and then bang, that's the only time they took me out of that foster home. I lucked out when I went to Jamaica Plain, and I got the colonel, who I called Dad. But once again, I was in that foster home before he came along. I had gotten raped. So, the seed was planted. The predatory seed was planted. And folks, in the world I come from, the inner city, the suburb, the inner sanctum of the projects living and all that kind of stuff, that's the jungle. And everybody starts in the jungle as prey. You're young, innocent, and you're prey. And Eddie Mack was young and innocent prey, and he was not alone. There are many Eddie Macks out there. And, that age of 9, the prey, the innocence, started to get taken away. And as soon as I got a little older and got tough enough, that was it. I said, I'm going to be the predator now. Now it's my turn to give back. And I tried it through being a professional fighter. I figure I can beat the tar out of people, and I'm not going to get arrested. But it was still, I didn't have the guidance that I was looking for. And, Street Soldier's not an old woe is me story by any means, because I've had opportunities along the way. People have tried to help me, but I was too young, ignorant, and already turning into the predator that I became. Did I answer that? Okay.
You had mentioned that John Conley, you thought we'd be seeing him soon because he had information to offer. Why do you think that he hasn't done so far?
I don't think John Conley expected the sentence that he was going to get. I honestly believe Big Brother was looking out for Big Brother. I'll give you a perfect example of why I think Big Brother was looking out. It's an awful thing. I've never asked for any of my kids. I never planned them, but I stepped up to the plate for every single one of them. And when I first had Devin, her mother was a one-night stand, as awful as it sounds. The male anatomy has 2 brains attached to it. My brain was thinking that night, so bango, I got a kid. Kathy comes walking by 7 months later, pregnant. I'll try to speed it up so I don't make the story too long. And I look at her, and I'm like, hey, Kathy, you going to have a kid, huh? She goes, no, we're going to have a kid. I was like, ugh. I was in denial. I hadn't seen her for 7 months. So I'm in front of the judge, to make a long story short, and he wants me, the DNA test comes back 98.9%, you're the father. He wants me to sign acknowledgement of parent, and I'm still in utter denial. I'm like, are you kidding me? She slept with everybody in town? I'm trying to say everything bad. It wasn't nice, but that's what I said. And I goes, Your Honor, I can't do that. And I almost got thrown in jail for this. It's very comical. I says, Your Honor, I can't do that. He goes, why can't you do that, Mr. McKenzie? I goes, well, I think there's a conspiracy going on here, sir. I honestly believe that Nazi SS she-wolf that you had stabbed me in the arm in there and take the DNA test, and the court mediator and the court-appointed attorney that you gave me, and, no disrespect for you, Your Honor, you all work for the same people. You all get the same paycheck every week. So what's to say that, just because my name's the only name in the hat, they're not going to get hooked for the next 18 years. He was like, "Cha, you're the parent, you're paying $100 a week, get out of my courthouse." And I was like, "Oh, well, they should listen." That's the same thing with John Conley. Good old boy network, looking out for each other. Here you have a guy that has $1.5 million worth of property, $80,000 speedboat. He's on an FBI pension. You don't see anybody moving to take his pension away like the Herald had reported a year ago. They're taking all these corrupt officials' pensions, and there isn't even a mention of it. He probably figured, all right, we're going to toss you for a couple of years, make everybody think we're doing, and he thought he was going to. Now he realized that it was no nonsense this time. He get 10, 12 years or whatever he got. So now he's like, uh-oh, reality's setting in. I didn't get what I was looking for. That's why you think he's going to turn.
Do you think he has a lot to offer?
Oh, my God, absolutely. Absolutely. That man set up a lot of people to be killed. You don't parade through the State House with young FBI agents to meet William Bulger all the time and then from there go over to South Boston and grab a couple cases of liquor from the South Boston Liquor Mart for your local FBI party. And you don't walk into the Broadway appliance store owned by Kevin O'Neill and Whitey Bulger and pick out appliances for FBI agents. And I personally carried a refrigerator with John Pretzi in John Conley's house from the appliance store. All gifts, you know what I mean? And so he's got a lot to say. Yes.
This book is a major point in your life. And so have you tried to project out at all, 5 years, 10 years? We get to do our driver's license over in this state every 5 years, and you have to look at that picture and say, what the hell did I do over the last 5 years? And have you thought ahead what you would like to do?
Thought ahead? Yeah.
No, 5 years.
Yeah, I'm working on another book, Management Secrets of the Mob, How the Dons Wield Power and Succeed. And, maybe I'll write a book after that. Maybe I don't. I really don't know. But my hope and dreams is, the most powerful message that I have in this book is just because you don't like the messenger, don't discount the message. It's a very powerful message here, folks, and I'm looking forward to going to high schools. Something I've done all my life with my gym, helping kids anyways. I'm looking forward to going to high schools. I'm looking forward to going to colleges and talking to the kids and just trying to let them know that, hey, let me tell you something. I don't want to hear any excuses. If I can do it, you can do it. And I'll give you a perfect example. I did a speech at Stonehill College last year. 200 to 300 kids there. It was fantastic. I got my Scooby-Doo baseball cap on and my shirt out, and I'm in the audience. I'm trying not to get detective. It's about a week or so after 60 minutes. And all the kids are coming in, dumb undergrads, they don't know anything, as far as what's going on around them. They only know what time the frat party's going on and stuff like that. So I'm like, and they're talking, they're like, oh, this Eddie McKenzie, mob enforcer, leg breaker, oh, man, And they still don't know that's me sitting with them. Nobody's paying attention. So gentleman comes in and he introduces me. And then I get up and all of a sudden it's like, you couldn't hear a pin drop. It was like a deer in headlights. Kids were like... And so now I come down, it's a golden opportunity. I goes, here's my first lesson of the day, kids. Respect. You never know who's next to you in life. You got to respect everybody. And then, of course, I got to be classic Eddie Mack and horrify the professors. And I grab the mic, I goes, because I'll fucking kill every one of yous. And they were like, whoa, this guy's cool, man, yeah! And then you should have saw the emails after that. They were sending emails like, this guy was unbelievable, it's great, So I like to send that message to people if I get that opportunity.
No follow-up.
Yes. Hold on a second.
When you got out of the prison, when you got out of prison, what did you use for skills to sustain yourself, to survive on, like day to day when you got released from prison?
What did I use?
Yeah, just to
experience. I've been on my own when I was about 12 or 13 years. I used to sleep under porches. My idea of shopping was going on clotheslines. In those days, they had all the clothes hanging on clotheslines. So I basically picked my outfits as I shopped around, and I got the best. And then, graduating from thief and all that stuff and learning how to, in the interim, I did work. I used to try to do the right thing in paint and carpentry. And then, I was a DJ and stuff like that. And, most of my life I've been a leader. I've been a go-to type of guy, And then I would get what I call giver's remorse sometimes. But then I'd get over that real quick because I'd basically give you the shirt off my back. I'd do anything for you that I could help you and stuff like that. And sometimes people would say, well, what the hell did you do that for? He'd never do that for you. And I'd be like, yeah, I know, but it made me feel good to do it. You don't understand. You know what I'm saying? So, those skills and all of life's experiences and the friends that I made along the way, DJing paid my way through college. I mean, I was getting $350 to about $1,200 for weddings and parties and stuff. It was great cash,
Meet the writers there. How did you make that connection to bring your history into their realm so that they could actually develop it into a book so that we could all appreciate and learn from it?
Well, here's another way on how I sustained myself. A gentleman owned a nationwide trade show company. He was working in Boston. He had a bunch of great kids from, Easton and the suburb, the leafy suburb area. All good, hard-working kids that wanted to make money. When they come into South Boston, then they got we call the union mentality. Every 2 hours I want my break, but I'm only going to work 5 minutes, and 55 minutes I'm going to be over the pub having a few shots with the fellas and basically stretching the job out as long as I can. But these kids from the suburbs didn't know that. All they knew was, a day's pay, a day's work. So the guy that was trying to break into the trade show business was having a lot of trouble with the Hell's Angels and South Boston thugs and stuff like that, because they were saying people from South Boston and stuff, and I'm not knocking people from South Boston, but this is just the way they were. They were saying, hey, what are you doing? You're working too hard. Take a little longer and stuff like that. And so they created a little animosity between the guy and his crew, and they were slashing his tires, smashing his truck windows, and basically trying to drive him out. So a buddy of mine introduced me to the owner, and to make a long story short, we turned out to be very, very good friends now. I still basically work for the company occasionally, and I was able to make all his problems go away within one day, And so he gave me a retainer for it, and it was a nice way to make some money. And then along the way of helping him and working with him, he says, man, you got a book in you. He goes, I got Ross Moscato, a kid that he grew up with, and this is from Easton. They're all athletes, and they all went to Oliver Ames High School, and they got a big family tradition, tight neighborhood. He goes, he's a strategic writer, and and he introduced me to Ross. So what happened was, me and Ross, I'm writing, like Ross said, I wrote most of it, and I kind of had a talent for bringing you into my world and telling you my story. So I'd send it all over. This book was mostly done on internet, by the way, because I'd be up at 3 a.m. sending over these 10-page emails and horrifying the both of them. So me and Ross did the manuscript, and we're a couple of amateurs. So we're trying to peddle it in New York and trying to get it done, and we can't get it done. So another friend of mine, Joel Kurtzman, who's in charge of World Thought Management for PricewaterhouseCoopers, and he's written some books before. He introduced us to Helen Reese, an agent in Boston. And we went to Helen Reese, and she said, well, the first thing you got to do is you got to get an author that's known, an accomplished author, to sell the book and to help you put the feminine touch to it and make it better, because, two Irish guys and stuff like that. It was pretty raw and manly. So then he introduced us.
I must confess, I never heard fellatio described as kamikaze dive on a joystick until I met you. Okay.
I don't even know what fellatio means, to be honest with you, but no, I learned it at a later date. But kamikaze on a joystick, I know that.
Boston Bridge.
Did I do what?
You ever caught a bluefish off the South
Absolutely,
Boston Bridge?
Man. Yeah, bluefish stripers. I've thrown a few people off that bridge, too. So anyways, here we meet Phyllis Karras. I meet her for the first time. And once again, I'm not into myself or anything like that, but I don't know who made it. I don't think it was Phyllis, because her husband's here, and he's a great guy. I don't want to get in trouble. I think Helen said it. You got great eyes, Ed. Blue eyes. And so I said, Helen, don't let the blue eyes fool you, because what I'm about to tell you would make any Quentin Tarantino movie look like Bambi. And then they started to read, and then Phyllis was like, then we got Phyllis, and then, because of her name and so forth, we were able to sell the book. And that's how it all started. Yes?
To follow up on
This
that,
guy's
could
good.
we ask Phyllis what it was like as a woman from the leafy suburbs entering your world? Could she
Absolutely.
speak to
Come
that?
on up here, Phyllis. I never really got the scuttlebutt on that myself.
A woman from the leafy suburbs working with these two. Well, it certainly was interesting. But, there's actually a lot of women in this book. There's four wives, there's 5 daughters, there's mothers of children who did not become wives. There's a lot of different women. So I think that the feminine touch, can be used in this book, and I think it had its certain purpose. Certainly a lot of the language was not language that I was as used to as Ross and Eddie, so we really didn't tone it down. I mean, that's what it was. But I've been amazed at how many women that have actually read the book and have said that they're enjoying it and that they find that this book has a women's audience as well as a man's audience. There were things Eddie had to explain to me, for instance, cocaine. Truthfully, I had never seen it. I had never used it. I had never sold it. I had never cut it in from bricks into little packages, and I remember Eddie trying to explain to me how that was done. And he actually used an image of a tomato paste can and explained, if you take a tomato paste can and then you put it in, it was all these instruments that they used to break it down. So I thought it was sort of interesting to see a leg breaker describing things about cocaine with a tomato paste can. But there were lots of these instances.
Well, I like to cook.
Yeah, I like to cook. And I'm sure, I drove them crazy. There was a lot of explanations that I had to have clear and that I didn't grasp, that the two of them grasped right away. But maybe it was better, the explanations, because maybe it made the book a little better for women to read as well, because it is, I really believe, a woman's book as well as a man's book. If you just get over the language, it's there too. Anyhow, that's the woman's take on it.
God bless Phyllis
I have
for
evidence
writing
right here
this book.
too,
Some of the
folks.
stuff she had to deal with, it was incredible.
She's definitely a changed person. I have the evidence right here. You don't want this to get ugly? Yes.
As a
I feel
parent,
like I'm on Jerry Springer. Look at this guy. Go.
as a parent, I am a willing hostage for life for my kids, and I think you understand that. How in the world are you going to keep your daughters safe after this? I mean, aren't there guys who are mad at you?
I'm going to stay in shape for the rest of my life. Are there guys that are mad at me? Yeah, probably Whitey Bulger and Steve Flemmy. But, I don't really implicate people in Street Soldier. I just share stories with everybody. In the beginning, I wanted to write some of the names have been changed to protect the not-so-innocent. But, they wouldn't let me put that Eddie Mac humor in there, so they just said some of the names have been changed. But, if Whitey Bulger and Steve Flemmy were freed tomorrow, found not guilty, these guys have been top echelon informants for 2 decades. They've sold, their friends, everybody out there, so many people want to kill them. They can never resurface. They can never come back to the neighborhood where they were at. So, in that sense, I'm not worried about that. But am I afraid? Of course I'm afraid. But coming from where I come from, you learn to live with fear. You learn to embrace fear. One of our presidents once said, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." You know what I'm saying? So, I wake up with fear every day. I go to a restaurant, my back's to the wall. I study the exits. I study everybody around. I can have a... Huh?
You can't be with your kids all the time. I mean,
No.
it must be hard.
It's not hard because I don't think that way. It's not the way you think. It's really an unwritten code. You don't go after kids and stuff like that. You could never go to prison if you did that because you'd get killed. Many parents in prison that are from this world that I'm from, they hate rapists, diddlers. That's why they torture these people when they go to jail and stuff. You just don't think about going after someone's children. They made a movie Scarface, and here you have Tony Montoya, whatever his name was, Al Pacino, one of the most vicious Cuban mafia figures who kill anybody. But he couldn't blow that car up with the young innocent kid in it. You see what I'm saying? So I try not to worry about that. I will say, though, once you have kids, I'm a firm believer this, you no longer have a life of your own. Lucky for me, I've been there and I've done that. So, if Dr. Karras called me today and said, "Eddie, I got Devin in the hospital. You got to give your heart to her. She needs a transplant. See you later." I'm gone because I'll do anything for my kids. Hope I get you some business out of this. Anybody else? Yes.
So where do you think Whitey Bulger is?
I was going to ask it if you were
Be
there.
asked.
Well,
It's on everybody's mind.
I've often thought he was sleeping in the Meadowlands with Jimmy Hoffa, or he might be dressed in drag, laughing at rural America for basically getting away with a life of crime. Because not only was Whitey Bulger a sociopathic serial killing machine, but he was also AC/DC. He swung both ways. He was a cross-dresser. He dressed up as an old lady many times. One time we're standing on the corner, 4 or 5 of us, and a lady comes by and she bumps us. And then she walks 4 or 5 feet over, and one of us got wise. He goes, "Well, excuse me, ma'am." And the lady turned around and was like, "There ain't no fucking excuse. I could have killed every single one of you." We were like, it was Whitey Bulger. Like he must have been practicing, or he must have been on his way to whack somebody or something. But we were all horrified. It was unbelievable.
About what your life was like when you were in the military, where you were in a more restricted society.
In the military, it was short-lived.
Was it?
But released honorably, thank God. Yes.
If one of those 5 girls was a boy, how would you keep the boy clean? How would
Kick
you keep
his ass. No, I've never hit any one of my kids. I give them maybe what I call a cracking, a little smack on the butt. But the relationship that I have with my kids is, if you give them an inch, they take a mile. My Devin and Kayla will talk back to their mother. You just couldn't imagine. My foster mother, the only lady I call mom, had what I called a boomerang shoe. If I was in the living room and she told me I had to do something and I talked back to her, that shoe would go down that hallway and hook around and nail me right between the eyes. 2 or 3 times of doing that, I never talked back to my mother. My kids, they test me every now and then because they're kids. They've got to test to see how far they can go. And once they flip talk, I get them right away. And it goes, hey, don't talk back to me like that, young lady. I get stern with them, but I only have to do that a couple times. When it comes to the extreme, like if, I call them Irish twins. They're 10 and 11 now, so they go at it like cats and dogs. And, I give them a little crack. It's about that hard. They're so hurt that I gave them a crack, and they're like, and of course, I got to get out of there because I'm ready to start bawling myself. I'm like,
You do the timeout, too. I've heard you do timeout.
yeah, timeouts and stuff like that. Half an hour later, we're going to Dairy Queen because I feel so guilty, So, man, but, that's...
Do you think raising a boy would be different with some of your personality traits and some of your...
Well, my daughter Courtney is 19 years old. A couple of days ago, just as big as I am. She won the state championships for the boys and girls team and won the state championships for Latin Academy in hockey as a goalie. I've seen her slam people on the ice like it was nothing, and she's as tough as they come. And then I've seen the whole team jump her and love her and hug her, and everybody rally behind her. So if I ever had a boy, it's I hope you're not watching this, Courtney, because I love you and you're a girl, but she's as tough as they come, and she takes right after her father. So if I had a boy, a big escape for me and a big way of overcoming racism for me was through athleticism. There's nothing in the world, you see these racists out in the street and they're killing and going crazy, but you walk into a boxing gym, or you go to a championship fight, and you got this big black guy across from you, and you're over here, and you're both going to beat the tar out of each other, and you want to win this fight. You're beating the daylights out of each other for a 10-rounder, and at the end you're hugging and saying, man, it was great, that was awesome. There's nobody thinking racism when they do that. So for me, the way I really overcome racism was through athleticism and stuff like that, and go walking in the UMass and getting that Malcolm X books. That was a big turning point for me. So that's how I do it if I had a son. I'd make sure his mind was healthy, his body was strong, and he was at a point to where he didn't want it. He didn't want anything to tear himself down. I believe I'm gifted, folks. My brother Ronnie, he went the drug road. He was on the cocaine. He got whacked out. One day he did 3 armed robberies. The poor kid. He was so whacked out on drugs and cocaine. He walked out of his house, walked 50 feet into store 24, pulled a Magnum on. He goes, "Give me a pack of Marlboros and everything you got in the register." They came there. It was like something out of the Keystone Cops. He walks 100 yards up and he goes into Brigham's. He's shattered. He goes into Brigham. He goes, "Give me a fucking hot fudge sundae right now, bitch, and all the money in the register." This all in the police reports. And as he was robbing them, the cops were flying to store 24. So he's like, got his hot fudge sundae, his Marlboros. He's like, and he goes, maybe another 150 yards to the liquor store. Hey, give me a 6-pack of Bud Light. And the lady there goes, "Ronnie, what the hell are you doing?" He goes, "Shut up, I'm thirsty." And he takes that and he goes around the corner where he lived. Broadway's here. Store 24, Brigham's liquor store. Around the corner, he lives maybe 200 yards. He's sitting on the front step. Hot fudge sundaes melted everywhere. He's got the bud, and he's the thing, and the cops pull up and say, "Ron, you want to get in?" He's like, "Okay, I just finished the sundae." So bang, here he is for 3 armed robberies. But that saved his life. He's the only guy, like my lawyer's Al Nugent. He's a great lawyer, and we became friends and he wrote the foreword in the book. He actually, for one of the few times in his career, tried to put somebody in jail. We shopped around to 2 or 3 judges to get my brother committed that day, cop him out, committed, gone, get him off the streets. But it saved his life, folks, because, you know, I got a beautiful niece and nephew, and he's got a lovely wife, and he just bought his first home, which I'm proud to say I helped him get and stuff like that. And, you know, he's got a great job, and his wife's got a great job, and it's all over for him. For me, I was so mentally tough and physically tough through fighting. Anything that took over my body in the form of drugs, or if I got to that 4th beer where I felt like this, I was like, wow, I don't want this. I tried cocaine, you know, I tried to speed and smoke some angel dust one time, but I tried it for maybe a week, and then I got paranoid. I didn't want anything to take over. I wanted to work out. I wanted to be healthy. So that's what I'd do if I had a son. I'd train him to think about his mind and body and his mental toughness. And he'd be so busy reading books and stuff like that, he wouldn't have time to think about that, you know.
It's an interesting point about you denying or trying to fight the addiction of drugs or alcohol because you wanted clarity, you wanted to think clear. Am I saying it correctly?
Yeah, I wanted mental strength, I wanted clarity, I wanted to think clear, but most importantly, my father was a drunken slob, a loser. You know, we found him, like, when I was on the ankle bracelet, my brother Ronnie wanted to find my father. I never cared. Yeah, I never knew you, you never stepped up the plate, you never did anything to me, I don't want to know you. But I fly him down to Florida, he finds my father gets on the phone, he's living in a little shed, he's a roofer, he's a bum. And he's talking to me, well, maybe I'll get up in a few weeks and see you and this and that. And I goes, well, listen, you know, I hope you're making good money. I goes, you got about $1 million saved? I was 35. He goes, oh, no, you know, no. I goes, well, that's what it's going to cost you, you prick, for all the years that you put me through. I goes, get the fuck off the phone and send me a picture. And my brother's pleading with me, Eddie, come on, it's my dad, it's our dad. I goes, it ain't my father. I just send me a picture, because you're always curious, you want to know what your dad looks like, you know. And I never want to be like that. So that's a good driving force for me too.
Gonna sign some books.
Okay, we're gonna sign some books. So that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I've got my shot.
Street Soldier is published by Steerforth Press on the web at steerforth.com.